We would love your support for programs like today by donating at mindsofspain.org or by dropping $1 or something in the donation box in the back of the room. As always, we are always in need of volunteers for the center, volunteers for various things that we do. If you're interested, hit me up, or mindsofspain@gmail.com is my email address. Send me an email if you have a question, a comment, or want to volunteer. So today, we are very lucky to have Gerda Preston Hartman, who is an amazing historian, and she's going to share just a tiny bit about what she knows. You've got lots of other topics that you could cover as well, but today we're going to talk about Finley's Landing. I'll let you go ahead.
Thank you, folks, for coming. I have so many friends here. I have people that heard my last program at Swiss Valley. And for all you new people, I will probably know you at the end of the day, right? So anyway, we'll get on with the program. I have presentation points up here today. My other one that I did back in October, I just talked from the podium. So this is new to me, which I'm so happy to have these now, thanks to the Swiss Valley Conservation group down at Swiss Valley. Okay, I have to first of all introduce Melvin Christensen. He's sitting right out here in the front row. That's my partner in crime. But anyway, Melvin is a really good friend. He lives his farm is still up there by Finley's Landing, but he lives in town now on the rural side. Anyway, Melvin was so happy when I came and said, Melvin, I think I'm going to be working on Finley's Landing again. So we're going to back up now a little bit. I have to give respect to the Native American population first. I have my table with a little blanket on it. I'm wearing some Native American earrings because, first of all, at Finley's Landing, they were there for 10,000 years. And so we owe them a lot. So I'll get on all this stuff as I'm talking. I think it's necessary I do a little Apache blessing. I'm going to walk closer to the window so I can read it. May the sun bring you new energy by day. May the moon soften and restore you by night. May the rain wash away your worries. May the breezes blow new strength into your being. May you walk gently through the world and know its beauty all the days of your life. Apache blessing. We have other people. I don't know if I'm looking for Kristen Gomstead Yoon, Y-O-O-N, who is the curator down at the our Dubuque Museum and Aquatic Center down there. She takes care of the all history records. So, and here's how all this came about that I met her. Okay, back in June of 2023, I'm a tour guide for the city and I'm hopping on all the buses. And this day I went down to St. Donatus to do a program. I never got to do the program because I come across the highway and fell flat on my face on the concrete in front of Calmus's. Broken arm in 3 places, bad, and pain. So anyway, I'm home for a few days. I stayed at my daughter's and then came home. And Brian Preston, he's been around the corner back there. You all know Brian, I take it, director of the Dubuque County Conservation Board. He come to my house to bring me food. I have a wonderful family of cooks, and he's one of them. And so he handed me my food. The next question out of his mouth before he gave me a hug to go was, Gerda, would you research Finley's Landing? I could have said, are you kidding, Brian? I researched it all my younger days and all up to this point of June. And my answer to him was, I'll try. I don't know why I came out with that, but I said, and then after I committed myself, I thought, I've got to do it. I've got to do it. Now, we're going to back up to June now of 2023. I'm at church. And one of the ladies that's to teach over at the Theological Seminary at the UAD, she said, I'm going to give you my father's books if you would like them. And he had a collection of William Peterson's. Any of you are familiar with William Peterson, anybody that does history, research, and you want to learn about the river. You want to learn about the steamboats, and you want to learn everything of that era of the early 1800s. That's the books you want to read. So I scurried through about 16 of them. And so when I fell, that was a month later. So I get in my head, I know all this information about the river. I knew most of it, but I was really up on it at that time. And I called down to the museum and talked to this Kristen Young. And I said, Kristen, would you please pull everything on steamships and their captains and anything on the last name of Finley except John Finley from the hospital. So, I mean, I can't drive. I can't even pull my pants up. And so, anyway, my friend was here from Chicago, and he could drive me. And I introduced you to Melvin. I got a hold of Melvin because we had been friends for a long time. And I said, Melvin, you're not going to believe this. Can you go down to the museum tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, and we got to start researching again. And so we get down there, and we introduce ourselves, and 10 minutes later, I picked up a manila envelope. There was about 5 or 6 there. I grabbed one, and I opened it up, and I could see James Finley in this column. You're going to see it on the board. And I had his writing about his father, John Finley, on the other side. I thought, you know, what's happening? This is divine guidance. That had to be divine guidance. That it came about at a time when I would have least expected it. And so there was the whole record. And so some of you have seen it in the paper. I have copies in the back, and I will bring that up on the board now. I'm using the PowerPoints. Okay, I haven't been getting in touch with Jennifer. Jennifer, it's the first time I'm asking you back up a little. Okay, I'm going to take you to Finley's Landing Beach. So you all know, because there's a lot of people here today that's never been there, I'm sure. This is an older picture. I'm going to be talking about Indian mounds, and while we got this picture up, those mounds are right up in there. But there's also another group of Indian mounds that we can't find. I wrote back to the archaeologists again, who I know, and I said, give us some more description of the area so we can get there. So next spring we're going to do that. And I could say this is me, but I'm sorry to say it's not. I was a river rat myself, but I'm on the river sunbathing out of a boat with the line attached to my toes. That's how I sunbathe over the years. But anyway, this is the only time you're going to see the beachfront. Up in this area, someplace on the upper side that comes into the harbor over here, there's a sunken ship. So right now, that's what my main thing is. I want to find out what the name of that ship was and when did it go under. And I have with me some records about a ship here on the table that the Corps of Engineers sent to me that wasn't the right ship. But boy, that information is really, yeah, there it is. Anybody has the right to look at it. It's called the Ravenna. It was a ship that carried it was for the logging. They pushed the wood down to Muscatine, and there was a tornado. And I always wondered about what would happen if it was out in the middle of the river. I've been out there in a bad storm, but not in a tornado. but that's what capsized the boat there. So that's what I want to find out about the missing one up here, because I don't want anything unturned. If there's something happening at Finley's Landing, I want to know about it. I fell in love with that place. Okay. Okay, here is the park when it was purchased back in 1967. Now, Melvin's mother and father, that was Paul and Opal Christensen, they were the owners of this property on Finley's Landing. They wanted to see it go to something that was for the community. I mean, there wasn't much left there. It was just the beach, not much going on there. But like the Conservation Society thought that would be a really valuable piece of park property. They were wanting to enlarge in Dubuque County at that time. That was like park number 7. Today there's like 25, so, but that was going up. But anyway, this is some of the newspaper printouts at first. This one down here is 1972. For years, it sat there idle because the road in was unpassable. It was muddy, rutty, and you needed a pickup to get in there. So Dubuque County did not have the money at that time to go ahead with it. So by this time of 1972, we're getting the road in there, and so they really made a lot of leadways. And they started camping in there pretty early. Okay, on this one, this is a map of Jefferson Township. Jefferson Township is crazy. If you know townships, the first row up here will be 1, 2, 3. But looking at Jefferson, 31, 32. It's the same as what you put down at the bottom. It would be down here if that picture was bigger. So Melvin and I went up to Clayton County because he came up with the idea that, hey, this land up here was in Clayton County. So we went up to verify that, but we knew more than they did. I'm sorry to say that, but in the olden days, the younger generation really don't know what went on. So anyway, and here is Finley's Landing, and this here. So there's also another 35. But anyway, that's how it goes. So that's where it's located. And we're talking 5 miles from Sherrill Mound. So this road was really, really bad. There was a family that lived in there that wanted the road named after them. But the engineer on that project for the new road said, no, it's staying Finley's Landing. So you can change that now. Okay, Wilma Wallace. She was a descendant of the Finleys, and I did not know that. I met her once at a DAR meeting. A real impressive lady. If you read her obituary, she was educated, I mean, to the max. And it's because of her that she donated the 3 manila envelopes that we had with the Finley information in it. And she gave it to the Ham House. We don't know why on earth she gave it to the Ham House. I think when she gave it, I'm not even sure if it was a Dubuque County historical place at that time, but it maybe was. But anyway, where was those records all these years? We're talking, 17 or 18 years ago before I discovered it. But she left the history, and she was a descendant. She's like the great-granddaughter of John Finley. That's who the park was named after. And you'll know all about John. Okay, here it is now. This is the one that was in the old history book of the 1880s, which we don't know what was the name of the book. My friend Mike Gibson is here today. We don't know where that came from, but you can tell they always separated most of the time. 2 stories. James Finley, the son, wrote it. That's his side. And then this is John Finley. That's his father right up there. But there was something in that manila in the letter that said Finley's Landing on the top. So I don't know why that's not there.
So, because it was named in honor of John Finley. That's why it's called Finley's Landing.
Yeah, but this copy from the olden days had Finley's Landing when we first saw it, because that's the first thing I saw was Finley Landing up there. I'll have to look at my copy and see what it says. Okay. Okay, let's talk about everything there. This is my crude drawing. Bear with me. I talked about the Indian mounds, and so the other Indian mounds, that was on top of the big hill bluff up here. That's overlooking the river and down below, and then down here should be some more Indian mounds. This is an old cave and mine run by the Emerson brothers. Hiking trail, Basswood Creek West, and there's Basswood Creek without the west, the identification. So the harbor comes in here. You're going to see a beautiful picture of the harbor right at the end. Our campsites, parking, the pavilion is there now, but underneath the pavilion there was a quarry. They filled it all in, but Melvin remembers the quarry. And the park rangers. The park is consisting of 116 acres, which is a beautiful amount of land. And then down here, the county owns 44 more acres. Melvin's mother was Opal Dadisman. And the Dadismans, that's their territory. They're from Germany. That's a lot of Dadismans. So Joel Dadisman donated this 44 acres for nothing. Nobody goes there. I have not been there. They just leave it for the habitat. So you can ask Brian Preston about that if you want to, or Melvin. I've never been there. Okay, we got all this and a lot of activity. There's stuff outside of the area of Finley's Landing, like this old depot. And I'll be talking about that depot later. This is the Park Road. And this depot was sitting right a couple steps away from the fence line. So that has a lot of history. The trains were put through that era in about 1870. That's the Sioux line today, and it comes down my way. I am on the Mines of Spain, and Melvin's by Finley's Landing. So we're kind of, this is our playground, so keep that in mind. I'm on the south end, he's on the north end. So we have a lot of fun with that. Okay, down here is the school. It comes in on Hanwin Road and joins with Finley's Landing. I'll show you some pictures on the slide later. They're coming up next, I think. Yeah, here's one. Thank you, Jennifer. The school, there's names on some of these photos. If you're here and you're a Stoffel or a Namen, or Spurl, it's Spurl, and Namens. But I thought I'd just show you some of these old pictures. Melvin's, this is his collection. This area is called Sweet Hole. See, that's kind of a washout. Sweet Hole, and then they got Basswood and West Basswood. This was a farm down there. There's nothing left of it today. It's all different. Families went out to fish. And so, okay, we covered those. That's some of the former properties. Here's some more of the Namen Finleys and the school, number 7. I just got from a relative, they said they were going through Atlas, a long time ago Atlas, and they said that it had initials alongside of the write-up about that school. And it was JL on it. John Finley does not disclose what his middle name was, but it's probably an L for Lee, L-E-E. The son is named that. Okay. Okay, the Rumpels owned it for a long time, and this is their family. But you can see the river before lock and dam time. Wilkies were there, and the Matches, and the wrestlers. Some of you might be here. Is anybody here from those families? Okay, nobody raised their hand. We're going to do a program up at Sherrill. We'll probably pick up some up there. Okay. Okay, I'm going to read this. You can follow along with me. Sweet Hole. This is from the Voss family history. Little tidbits. I put it together. We were back in Dubuque for a short time by my grandparents. My parents were thinking about going back to Montana and see if things were better there. A friend of Grandpa's, Ed Heller, heard of a farmer that needed help and knew of an old farmhouse for rent near Finley's Landing in Dubuque. That was the old farmhouse you saw. Dad got a job working for a Mr. Mongol for $1 a day. Yeah, I said $1. And they rented the farmhouse for $5 a month. They were also on relief for a while. I don't know how long. We carried our water from spring and used kerosene lamps. Again, I was in another school, 3 in less than 5 months. This was very difficult for me. I missed a great deal in my 3rd grade. My grandpa paid my tuition so that I could go to school in Dubuque, and I stayed with them during the week. They were very good to me. When spring came, my mom sowed watercress and planted a big garden. We had a creek near a house, and the boys would go fishing. Carl took me fishing a couple of times, but I made too much noise, and he would get mad at me. Don also ran traps, and one day he got sprayed by a skunk. Mom made him take his clothes off and bury them. The boys also raised rabbits. Mom went berry picking, and in the fall would pick nuts and try to sell things from the garden. Our place was called Sweet Hole. Isn't it nice to have these reminiscences and bring back the memories of what they were there? Cindy Voss, you would probably know Cindy. Cindy was a music teacher at Table Mound. My daughter had her. She married a Mueller, Mueller, up in Sherrill. He's passed away now, but Cindy's a good friend of mine. Okay, let's talk about that depot a little bit. The depot, the train would stop there, every time it was going through. In those days, it'd be like getting the steam up, and if there was a place close by, like if they were coming from Speck's Ferry, per se, and coming up the river, they probably wouldn't have all their steam going. And so, anyway, they'd stop and take on people and let people off. In this little place like Finley's Landing. But in Sherrill Mound, we had the end of yesterday, Peter Fry's Hotel and Beer Garden at Sherrill's Mound. This was a great place, man. If we would have been young in those days, we'd have tried to make it up there. Dance hall, restaurant, and inn. So the people would get off of there in some way. There must have been a stagecoach there, a wagon, I don't know. But they pick people up when that train was due and bring them into Sherrill. And they take them back to Sherrill to get back on the train again. So that depot was really working. Today this is a privately owned place, and it was called the Black Horse Inn. Maybe some of you went up there. That's that great big limestone 3-story building at the Fork up in Sherrill. So that's a little bit of story about him. Okay, now we got a slide in that's way out of context.
I can skip around if you need to.
Let's go further and get away from that when I do the family history. Okay, let's hold up on those. Back those up to the Finley line. I might as well address. I have put together the whole family tree for John Finley. John Finley was born in Finleyville, Pennsylvania, and he left his parents' home After he was married for a short time, there's no record, no children. I think she must have died shortly after marriage. But then he comes to this area, and he comes into Indiana, and he met this lovely girl, Margaret. She was from Kentucky. And so then they started to have children. Then he moved to Arkansas with Margaret. Then he moved to St. Genevieve, Missouri with Margaret, and accumulation of children by this time. And then they arrive in Dubuque, 1833. So there's a husband, wife, and 4 or 5 kids. So anyway, what does he do? He runs a big supply store in Dubuque. I don't know how big it was in 1833. It probably was a fourth the size of this building, probably even smaller than that. But it's good for me to know that. My family came in 1835, so I can picture them coming into Dubuque and buying supplies from John Finley. What other supply store was in Dubuque? Probably none. So I know my family would have known him. So I don't know if I'm driven here by this divine guidance. I don't know. But this putting this program together and looking up the records has been overwhelming to me. And this is book number 8 starting. So I've been through it before, and this one's so exciting. So anyway, he decides in 1838 he's going to give up his store, and he's going to move up to Finley's Landing, which had no name at that time. There's nothing but the ships coming through, which was plentiful. The ships were coming fast at that time. They were over at Cincinnati across the river. They were at Potosi. They were just doing really good with their shipping. And shipping was hard. Oh man, I read all those books. Every day they needed cordwood for the ships. They could only carry so much. If they came to a snag or something that stopped them from being able to go over the shoals, it's unbelievable what they went through. Their voyages up there and down the river were just so dangerous. Those boilers could blow up. So anyway, I just love that history, but I probably wouldn't have liked it if I was born then. But we didn't know any history on Finley's Landing, so I had to start looking for all river stuff, the landing, you know. I had to just put myself in that mood, and I should have asked you to put yourself in that mood, like shut your eyes for a second and just drop down there that 1800 period. John Finley, like I said, where he come from, his wife, these are his children. Now, most of the children passed away. If they were born, they didn't live to adulthood. But I have the family trees for all the ones that made it. James did make it. Okay, John Finley was from Finleyville. So after I got all this other information, I started to kind of work on Finleyville, Pennsylvania, and yeah, it's still there. The librarian there is fabulous. So I'm going to be telling you about his father when we get on another slide. But okay, can we get that? Let's see. I don't want to miss anything. That road for Finley's Landing, that gentleman by the name of Mr. Mim is the one that wanted the road named after him. But we're so thankful they kept the Finley name. The Finley's Landing has been purchased by so many people. We have way over 20 by checking the abstracts at the courthouse. The courthouse don't go back anymore. They refuse. After I stood there for 2 solid hours, they said, "This is it. We don't go back any further now." They could have told me that in the beginning. Anyway, it was a rest period for me. So, anyway. I'm just skimming through here. I've got so many things. We're going to dwell on the cemetery.
I did put up a slide that says the steamboat. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Okay, as long as you got it up. The oldest son was James Lee Finley. And okay, John Finley died in 1847. Well, he left Finley's Landing in 1843, and so he thinks he must be thinking about farming. There is no records because Iowa was not a state yet. We got held up for 1 year in our areas around here because the government didn't want to give up the rights to the mineral grounds. So, like, our farm is 1847 before we could be legally owners. And then it wasn't legal because there was a big lawsuit with August Chateau down in St. Louis. And he was saying Julian Dubuque owed him a lot of money. So our land up here could not be under total ownership until 53. But anyway, James Finley is older now, and he and his mother and some of the children went from a farm by Durango. We can't find it, have no idea what land purchase he was trying to make. And so James come back to Specs Ferry. So that was really cool. A couple miles downriver, he gets a job piloting a boat just like this. This is a really old picture. And he pilots the boat. So he likes it so well that Mom and the kids and him all purchased land over across the river in Waterloo Township, between Cassville and Potosi. And that's where they set up residence then. So that put all the kids and James and all of them and his mother over in Wisconsin. So he left the Iowa side. He was only a captain of the ferry for about 1.5 years or 2. Not very long, but shipping beer across the river. That was some of the things. But anyway, he ushered people and did stuff like that because, you know, we didn't have bridges. They had to go on the water sources. So anyway, then in tracking all of that family tree up till today, I had to go to the researchers. Melvin and I we even hit Owine, Iowa for Julia, and we went to the library in Potosi. We went to the library in Cassville. We walked graveyards. We cannot find the burial place for John Finley, nor his wife. And she died exactly, we know, August of 1860. Now, we've checked every cemetery, everything possible, and the researchers as well. We can't find either of those graves. But James is buried in, James down here, right here. He's buried there, and Julia come back from Owine and is buried there. And so they just were all of a sudden residents. And then the Army pictures, if you can bring those up.
There's
Backwards. Before when we had Howard.
The singles?
Yeah, that one. Okay, Howard Finley is one of the children, and James was the other one, and they both enlisted in the Civil War. Mama was over there. James here was married. Now he signed up when his wife was pregnant. This war was only supposed to last 2 months, and he wanted to serve his country, him and Howard. Well, Howard got killed at the battle down of Decatur in Georgia. And James made it through. So that's why he left a lot of us with the family tree. And so it's through him, we found the article, and through him, he made it really good. He was a landowner at the end, and he was a veterinarian, must have learned that in the military. But that Civil War went on. They enlisted with the Wisconsin Regiment in 1862. And he didn't come home till 65. That little girl was born. He never seen her until 65, and she would have been born in 62 or first 63. But that's what they did in these olden days, stuff like that. How did she make a living? There was no handouts. I don't understand. And she's got this little girl. But then he had 3 more kids after he come back home. And okay, now James Finley, the one we just had, this is his daughter. Charles, contract to cut willows. Okay, that's her husband. That was his occupation. So he was on Finley's Landing too at one time helping. Okay, I got to talk about the wood yard. But anyway, it's through this lineage that I could do the family tree. So you saw Wilma before. Wilma's the daughter of these two. She's the one that left the copy for us to read. I'll jump back now that I see this. John Finley went out to the island. We talked about the steamboat and how they'd pick up wood every day. He ran a wood yard. They cut all different kinds of wood, $2 for a cord of the cheaper softwoods, and $3 for a cord of the better stuff like the oaks and the hickory. And so that's what he did. Why would he give up a store in Dubuque for a wood yard? We don't know, but he had plenty of help with all these kids. Maybe that was an answer. I don't know, but he made it, and he got to see all those captains. It was exciting. He had more action there than he had in Dubuque, with all these boats stopping. We have census records up the yin-yang. That's how come we got the family tree together. I'm going to let Melvin stand up here. We're going back to that depot. The depot property was handed down through a lot of different parties, and he's going to show you a sword. This just come into his possession lately, and we thought it belonged to the 2 children that was in the Civil War, but it goes further than that. But he's going to talk about the depot first and tell you about that.
The depot was also owned by Peter Fries at one time, when Peter Fries owned the hotel in Sherrill. And I thought that was quite the entrepreneur, that he owned the property down there at the depot. And he also owned a bunch of other property around the Sherrill area, according to the old plat books. So there was this myth about this sword, and I got to throw a little bit at Brian, because I was after Brian to chase this sword down. He seemed to know something about it, and with the myth there was a priest involved with this sword. Well, that made it more interesting yet. And Brian never came up with it, and finally I started chasing after it, and I went through. I knew Art Ressler. He used to own a auto dealership in Cascade, and Art was the owner of the depot down there, and this sword was supposedly in that depot. That was the story. So the priest ended up being one of Art Ressler's sons. Actually, Art Ressler had 2 sons that were priests. One of them, when I was chasing the sword down, was dead. The other one was Father Mark Ressler. So on a whim, I called the archdiocese one day, and I said, "Hey, you got a phone number for Father Mark Ressler?" Just for the heck of it. Sure. So I called Mark, and I said, "Mark, you ever know about the sword that was in the depot down at Finley's?" "Oh, yeah, I know about that." I said, "Where's it at?" I said, "I don't know. I have no idea." He said it hung above the door or the fireplace or something in the depot. And he gave me another name, and I'm not supposed to mention the name, so I won't. And like I called the other name, and I says, "My name, I'm looking for the Finley sword. It used to be in the depot down at Finley. Do you know about it?" "Oh, yeah, I know about it." He said, "Do you know where it's at?" And he says, "Nope." Don't know where it's at. I said, if you find it, will you call me? I'd like to take a picture of it. 20 minutes later, he calls me back and he says, I found the sword. I said, well, can I come look at it? Yeah, when do you want to look at it? I said, right now. So I went to this man's house and he says, it was standing down in the basement in the corner behind my golf club. And so we got it out, and it's we don't know if this is revolutionary or civil or whatever, but it's got Finley on it. And if any of you people know of a antique roadshow expert or something, so continuing on with the story, when I went to look at it, and I told the guy, I says, do you know anything about this sword? No. It's been hung in my business for like 20 years, and that's why it's painted. He had it on the wall there. And I says, I brought $1,000 along. Will you sell it to me? Well, I don't know. He said, now that it's from Finley's, he said, I'll have to talk to my family. Well, about a year later, this is the third year, about a year later, he called me up and he says, are you still interested in that sword? Yeah, I am. I made you an offer on it. Does that still sound good? Oh, no, he said, I need a little more money than that. So I ended up giving him a little more money than that, but now I have it, and it's quite a piece of work. So Brian never found the dang thing, but he was the first one. I sent him a text. I said, Brian, I found the sword, and I held it in my hand.
So he reimbursed you.
It's in process.
That's why we're looking for money so we can pay for this stuff. No, I'm kidding. But getting back to the sword, there's some etching on it, and the etching says Finley. And before, it's so miniature, you got to have something that would enlarge it to even see it. But the first two things before it is DC. DC. Yeah. And there's no Finley with those initials. So I, in the middle of the night, when I'm thinking about everything, I thought, that can't be the Civil War. That can't be the Civil War. I had just got finding out who John Finley's father was. Here he is. Here he is, John Finley, same name. So John Finley here, we discovered he's junior. This is the senior, the money bags. Anyway, I love this history. He's buried, him and his wife, in a private yard, and they have to mow around. It's in their yard. They actually own it, But people come from all over the country. Like if Melvin and I decided to go to see his gravesite, well, that's where we would find it, in Finleyville. But he ended up with about 1,000 acres because he was in the Revolutionary War. And he made it through, and he was a drummer boy. So in the middle of the night, I thought, oh, that sword can't be Civil War. It's got to be his. The DC stands for
DM.
DM, drum major.
Drum major.
Drum major. So does that make sense? DM. So I Googled it. That's how I found it. So that really makes it. And being he's the oldest boy, probably gave it to him to come a different location from Finleyville. Don't know how he got it, but that's probably going back to the Revolutionary War. A drummer boy is not a veteran, per se. That's a separate rank. That's a separate thing, away from regular military things. But yeah, it's so great. And now that we get it back to this generation, that's really makes it important. But it's funny where it was, from the beginning in that depot, how it changed hands. But I knew he was going to get it. The owner had called me, and I was talking to him, and he said, I think I'm going to get a hold of Melvin. I think he really likes this sword. And so I knew, I didn't tell him. I didn't tell him. But anyway, that's what makes us working together and to be on top of everything. James Finley left an amazing history over there in Wisconsin. Like I said, he was involved in so much. There is a descendant today, and her name is Colleen Halverson. Colleen, you're not here by any chance? I haven't seen you. No, you're not. But anyway, she ended up on the end of the family tree, and she was still alive. She has moved out of Wisconsin, been around the country living, and she moved back home just as I was finishing up with the researcher in Wisconsin. And the researcher says to me, you know, you've got a descendant of Finley's right in Dubuque. I'll give you her name. So I found her phone number, and she did not know she was a Finley. When I gave her all those records, it was just like a good deed to her. I always invite her to wherever I'm doing a program or something, and I was hoping she'd come today, but Melvin has been twice rounding up side-by-sides from the friends and neighbors so that we can get back to the area onto the west of Finley's Landing. There's a cemetery there. It doesn't have a grave site, it doesn't have anything, but one of the older ladies, Margaret, she was a Bliley Heiderscheik today. She went with us on the side-by-sides with her two boys. And they can remember hunting there when there was 4 corner posts. Now this is not on the property, but right next to it, but it's up in the hills. And you want to come in from the opposite direction if you go from Finley's Landing. There used to be a road called Pape Road there, but that's impassable today. And it's going through other private ownerships and pastures. There's cows. The Indian Mounds on top, the cave, which we think took out quite a bit of ore at one time. I'm a caver and an archaeologist, so, but anyway, I get all the records. But anyway, we go to the west from the other side and come in on the side-by-side. So we were just up there again in the fall. And we just looked for something that would tell us what in the world this cemetery's name is. One time I was talking to the Hammerans, and one of the ladies' sister was with us and them, and we were meeting after a program. And she said, I think that's poverty patch, or poverty, not poverty, when you're poor, Paupers Cemetery. So that's what I named it, Paupers Cemetery. I know they were poor, and there's probably a lot of those Finley children buried there, but there is no evidence. So it's kind of sad, but it does have, at one time, we're estimating maybe 20 people there, and we do not, there's supposed to be Pape children maybe buried there. So they had a lot of children in those days, but they didn't make it. So that's kind of something that we like. I'm trying to pick up some more of the things that are around the Finley's Landing. It's a really unique park. It's more private. If you camp there, you know, it's pristine. The boats coming in and out of the harbor aren't bad. It's quiet, and there's a ranger there. So here we are, the beautiful scene. The Dubuque County Conservation Board helped me with a few of these pictures. That is beautiful today. You can take the hiking trails. There's to get up into that mountainous hill there. But go up there sometime and just get the feeling of the caves there, the Indian mounds are there. The Native Americans, there was a lot of artifacts found. There was a dig, and I got all that information. The site sheets are numerous. She gave me about maybe 20 site sheets. they go all over the area when they're doing archaeology. Like on the mines of Spain, we hit every nook and cranny on the mines of Spain. They found pieces of pottery. They found broken stones. They found stones that were worked on that we call flint knapping today. But they never found, in the bottom of a sheet of paper, it'll say, I'm sorry, but we don't have any artifacts because the former owners have them. And I don't know who former owners are. Melvin doesn't know anything about artifacts collected in the early days. But those Native Americans were there. When Finley was there, they were also there. Down here in the mines of Spain, our family was here, surrounded with Native Americans. So that went up to about 1843. So, but anyway, they utilized it, 2 mounds. Those mounds are supposed to be Hopewellians, from what they're telling me, which would be about 2,000, 2,500 years ago. The ones in East Dubuque are in that same time frame, Hopewellians. And so I picture them. I just picture them having their living quarters on that. It would have been a big sandbar at one time, I guess you'd call it. It gets dredged out in the river every so often. And the boat, there's that sunken boat on the end of the harbor. Now I said, I'm not going to go to my grave not knowing what boat that is. So I got help. I got one of my neighbors that's checking it out right now. I get help from all of you folks. No matter what you tell me, I can record it as history. You know, I love that. I might not hear you, but has anybody got any questions? Okay, I'm going to come close so I hear you.
Who was left in Finley?
Southwest Wisconsin, there's a Centipede Recreation Area over in Wisconsin, and up on the bluff, it's a prominent bluff right across from John Deere. There is a Finley graveyard up there. So I assume you know about that, but...
Yeah, I do know about that. This gentleman is questioning what took place in Centipede, across the river from John Deere. Been up there and I saw that cemetery. We have not made any connection with that John at all. I wish it would be his, but it's too new. It's too much.
Who was Lefty Finley?
Lafayette?
Lefty.
Lefty.
That name is,
He didn't hear.
I know him from fishing.
You know him from fishing. What was his name?
Lefty, I don't know if it's right, I don't know his real name.
Lefty Finley?
Lefty. Do you know any lefties, Merle?
Leslie's?
Yeah.
Lefty. Like left
Lexi?
hand.
Lefty, no, I don't, that doesn't ring a bell.
Doesn't ring a bell from that area. You had a question over here?
One of your slides was saying cut willows from wing dams.
Okay, I'm glad you asked that.
Yeah, do you know a history of wing dams?
Not very much. I know when I cross them or I fish at them, but I don't know when they were put in. Does anybody know when the wing dams were put in? I know when the Lock and Dam 11 was put in. Are we talking the 1920s, 30s? I don't know. I don't know, but there is a wing dam there, I guess. Melvin's going to address that. He's going to read you something about a person that lived there in the depot that went out to put a lamp on the end of it.
I don't have the answer to that question about the wing dam. It just says that the Finleys cut willows for the wing dams, but the dams weren't put in until the 30s, 1930s
37.
or so. So I have a tidbit about an antrim, A-N-T-R-A-M, and I was told by Merlin Bremeyer from Cheryl that, oh, yeah, your pointer
Oh,
there.
geez,
Pointing it.
Merlin Bremeyer, who is no longer with us, told me when I was talking to him about Finleys that there was a Merlin antrim that lived in the old depot and would take care of the kerosene lights on the buoys out in the river, and he would paddle out with the boat to do that. So there was an Antrim buried in the cemetery, and by the way, this is about all the 5 cemeteries in Sherrill, Iowa, all except St. Peter and Paul. I helped put this book together last year, and it's a fabulous source of history and grave sites, and you can get it online for $60. So worth more than that. But, so in 1883, 25-year-old Jenny Antrim, she's the gal that's buried in the Methodist Cemetery at Sherrill. Daughter of William and Jane, also Jenny Smith Patterson, married 50-year-old Peter Antrim. That's why her name. The marriage record states her name is Jenny Cox, and she was born on Turkey River, Clayton County. The box on the form asks for her name and if she has been widowed. Jeannie Harrison is written in the box. The register states Peter was born in Ohio to Davis and Julia Ann Green Antrim. He was a government lighthouse master. It was Jeannie's second marriage and his third. No record of Jenny or her son Martin was found in the 1880 census. Searches were done with the surnames Patterson, Cox, Harrison, and Harrison. Marriage records for Iowa were also searched, so no additional clues were found for her first husband's identity. In 1870 and 80, Peter Antrim is enumerated in the Jefferson Township census. In 1870, he was 38, and his wife Elizabeth was 31. Their children were Alois, Adeline, and other ones. Then later on, this Jean's obituary was published in the 1940 Des Moines Register with the headline, "A light goes out along the river." There's another reason I'm reading this obituary. The name Brighton, Brighton. It refers to a beach, and I haven't had anybody to tell me where this beach was, and I can't find any record of it. It was supposed to be somewhere around Specksbury or between Specksbury and Wapaton. Dubuque, Iowa, funeral services will be here Friday afternoon for Mrs. Jenny Antrim, 82 years old. She was in charge of all government lighthouses in Dubuque County for the last 50 years. She died at her home on Brighton's Beach, about 12 miles north of Dubuque. Miss Antrim was born in Turkey River, Iowa, in 1858 and entered government service in 1894. She has been a lighthouse tender at various points along the Mississippi between Bellevue and Wapaton ever since. In recent years, she had been stationed at Brighton's Beach between Specksbury and Wapaton. Mrs. Antrim was known by rivermen from one end of the Mississippi to the other as one of the few women lighthouse tenders in the United States. Her husband, Peter Antrim, died 46 years ago. A son, 2 sisters, and 2 brothers survived, and the burial will be in Sherrill. So anybody knows anything about Brighton Beach? After the show,
In finishing about the family history, John Finley in Finleyville, his father's name was Robert Finley. Traced it back, and his wife's name was Jean Boyd Finley, and he was born in 1720, so we're going back a long ways. Came from Mallaig Habrick Parish, Antrim, Northern Ireland. So we just talked about the same last name as that town. So you can see how people bring stuff from the old country to this country. That was really fun to find his ancestry. So when I gave it to Colleen, she's got it all. So any more questions? I know it's an hour up now, so some of you have things to do.
I'll tell how we ended up with the property. because that was.
Yeah, that would be very nice. Thanks, Melvin.
So that seemed to be enjoyable at the last meeting. So I was at a soup supper, and Kenny Mazzina was part of the church. And at the soup supper, Kenny says to me, "Melvin, I'm going to tell you a story about your grandpa." I'm like, oh boy, here we go. He says, when I was a young man, 17 or 18 years old, he said, that property out at Finley's that belonged to William Rumpel came up for auction. So he said, I was a young man starting out, I wanted to go farming. He said, I went down there and your grandpa was clerk at that sale. And Kenny went to my grandpa and says, Charlie, he said, that young man, he said, this is all pasture. He said, I'd like to raise some cattle. What about me buying this? So I have a start farming. And according to Kenny, my grandpa looked at him and he says, bid your heart out, son, we're buying it. So that was, my grandfather bought that property in somewhere around 1940 or early 40s or so. And then my mother and father inherited it from Charles and Carrie Dadisman. And that's how we ended up with it.
So any more questions? One more? One more? Wow, I must have answered everything in Melvin. See how much fun it is working with him? It's just, he comes from the area and he knows it so well. If he had a question about the mines of Spain, I'd be able to answer all that. So come again, use the facilities at our parks, this one particularly. Some of you were here at the hike on the first day of January, and that was a fabulous turnout. Today it's been wonderful. This is the biggest group I've ever had, so thank you so much.